yes, happy May the 4th, and what better day to start reviewing the Star Wars franchise. And so, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, here we go, I am reviewing Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Yes, over the next couple of weeks to months on this channel, I'm going to be reviewing the entire, most of the Star Wars franchise, because I've already reviewed the Middle-earth saga, which consisted of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy, on this channel earlier this year. And earlier this year, I also reviewed the Harry Potter franchise on this channel, which I finished reviewing in March. So I thought, what franchise should I review next? And my thoughts immediately went to Star Wars. So over the next couple of weeks to months to however long it takes on this channel, I'm going to be reviewing most of the Star Wars franchise on this channel. And that includes all 9 main Star Wars movies, which I'm starting off reviewing today. I will also be reviewing the Star Wars spin-off films, which include Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, and Solo, A Star Wars Story. And I will be reviewing the Star Wars Disney Plus shows that have released since 2019. So that includes The Mandalorian seasons 1 to 3, The Book of Boba Fett, Andor, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and The Acolyte, which will be coming out and will be airing around the same time that I am doing all these Star Wars reviews on this channel. So I'm going to go back and rewatch and re-review those Star Wars TV shows that I just mentioned and see if my thoughts on those shows have changed, because I haven't really done a proper rewatch on any of them apart from Andor since I first saw them. So that's what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks to months to however long it takes on this channel. However, notably, I should say that I will not be reviewing any of the Star Wars animated TV shows or films on this channel at all, because they're just not for me. I remember watching the Clone Wars movie back in 2008 in the cinema, and it didn't really work for me whatsoever. And I tried rewatching that film, and yeah, I really don't like it. And I tried watching the Clone Wars TV show. I've tried watching it innumerable times, but it's really, I struggle with that type of animation. And I haven't even tried watching Star Wars Rebels or Star Wars Bad Batch, because I know I'm going to have that same experience. So the Star Wars animated TV shows aren't for me. I wish they were, and if they are for you, that's amazing. I'm so jealous. But because they're not for me, I will not be reviewing them on this channel. But everything else Star Wars, all the live action Star Wars stuff, I will be reviewing on this channel over the next couple of months to weeks to however long it takes. That doesn't make sense. Other way around. To the next couple of weeks to months to however long it takes on this channel, as we already said 3 times now. So where to start with reviewing the Star Wars franchise? That's where my head was at the other day, and I thought, what better place to start than where the Star Wars story begins? Not the first Star Wars movie to be released. The first Star Wars movie to be released was Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, which came out in 1977, and which was originally titled just Star Wars when it came out. But instead, I'm going to start off with Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the beginning in terms of the story and the timeline of the Skywalker saga. And the reason one of the big reasons I'm starting off with reviewing Star Wars The Phantom Menace as part of my Star Wars reviews on this channel for this year, because I have done some Star Wars reviews in the past, but let's just forget about them, shall we? The reason I'm reviewing The Phantom Menace now, today, on May the 4th, happy Star Wars Day, everyone! That's one of the big reasons I've started doing these reviews today. Yes, happy Star Wars Day, everybody! And the reason I'm starting these doing these Star Wars reviews, the reason I'm reviewing the Phantom Menace today even, is because the Phantom Menace, it's celebrating its 25th anniversary this weekend. And this year as a whole, kind of also. Because this weekend, the Phantom Menace is re-releasing in cinemas. I'm pre-recording this before May the 4th, so I haven't seen it in cinemas yet. But I will be going to see it in cinemas the Friday, the day before May the 4th. And I'm so looking forward to doing so, because even though, you know, and I'll go into this a lot more detail later on in this review, even so, this is not my favourite Star Wars movie. Just getting to watch a Star Wars film in the cinema, which I haven't had the opportunity to do since The Rise of Skywalker came out in 2019, thrills me. So I'm really excited to do that. And so I'm reviewing this weekend because it's releasing in cinemas. This year, you know, the Phantom Menace is also celebrating its 25th anniversary in LEGO Star Wars, as well as LEGO Star Wars is releasing sets that are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace, which I didn't expect them to do, but I'm really happy that they've done. And I'm a big LEGO fan, and I'm a big LEGO Star Wars fan, and guess what? I'm a big Star Wars fan, and that's another reason I'm reviewing The Phantom Menace today. Because The Phantom Menace, although I understand that it's not a good movie, and I'll get onto that in more detail later on in this review, this film, I still enjoy it. And it still holds a special place in my heart, because it was my introduction to Star Wars, and it was also sort of my introduction to films in general. I remember watching this film for the first time back in primary school, and I was at a much younger age. And back before I watched this movie, I didn't watch many films. I'd seen a few here and there, but I don't think I'd ever properly sat down to watch a film and got myself fully invested and fully engaged in the film that I was watching. And the thing is, I'd heard about Star Wars before I watched this film, because I was at primary school. And, you know, people at primary school that I knew, friends that I used to have there, they'd seen the Star Wars movies, or they'd seen a couple of Star Wars films. And plus, Star Wars was so ingrained in pop culture, and it still is so ingrained in pop culture, regardless of what some people say online nowadays. It still is ingrained in pop culture. And so I knew about Star Wars. I'd heard about it, you know? But I'd never seen anything Star Wars until I watched this film for the first time at a much younger age. And I remember it was a Saturday that my parents told me, tonight we're gonna, as a family, watch Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And I didn't have a clue what to expect. I had no idea what to expect at all. And I was kind of sitting down to watch the film thinking, I'm probably gonna leave in 10 minutes. Because that's what I usually used to do when I was watching movies when I was a kid. If I got bored in the first 10 minutes of the film, I would just walk out and go upstairs and watch The Simpsons, or watch whatever was on television at that time, whatever was on broadcast television, and just play my Lego, which I've got down there still. But I didn't with Star Wars, with The Phantom Menace, because I remember the film started and the 20th Century Fox logo began, you know, the bum 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 ba-rum, bum ba-dum, I'm singing it horribly, but you know what I'm getting now. And you had the 20th Century Fox fanfare begin, and then the titles came up a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I'm thinking, is this a true story? And then the John Williams Star Wars fanfare begins. Bum ba ba bum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum 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 bum. And I could not believe what I was witnessing. I was overwhelmed. So overwhelmed, I wasn't even reading the opening crawl. I didn't care what the opening crawl was. I was like, why is there words in space? I don't know, but it looks awesome. And then the movie properly starts. We're introduced to our main characters, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan. Then we see lightsabers, and I'm like, what the hell are lightsabers? They're like laser swords, but cooler than swords. And then the film carries on, and there's all this peculiar, but at the same time eye-popping creature and spaceship designs, and I'm going, whoa, what is this film? And the world that I was being introduced to was like, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. This film was opening up my eyes to what films could be like, to the world films could introduce me to. And I was completely taken by it. And the thing is, when the film finished, I knew that I'd enjoyed it. I knew that I enjoyed it for certain, because I couldn't take my eyes off the screen while I was watching it. Because back then, I didn't care about plots, I didn't care about writing, I didn't care about the dialogue. I just cared about all the cool designs of the characters, the creatures, the world. I wanted to be in the world of Star Wars, and I cared a lot about, the lightsaber duels more than actually the story behind everything, because the story for the film really doesn't make any sense, and I'll talk about that in more detail later on in this review. But going back into what I was saying, the thing is, when I finished this film for the first time, I knew I enjoyed it, but I didn't really understand the effect it had on me until the week after, because when the film finished, my parents said to me, okay, next week we'll watch the sequel. Next week we'll watch Attack of the Clones. And I was like, wait, there's more of them. Which shows you how dumb I was back then, because, Episode 1, the film, it's in the title, of course there's going to be more of them. The film's called Star Wars Episode 1. But anyway, I was like, what, there's more of them? And then the next week, the following days leading up to the next Saturday when I was going to watch the sequel to Phantom Menace, I couldn't stop looking at this VHS box. I've got it down here. This VHS, remember these? I don't know how many people remember them now. They're kind of coming back into fashion, if you will. They're starting to be collected again. But anyway, I couldn't stop looking at the front cover of this VHS box from what we watched the Phantom Menace on. We watched the Phantom Menace for the first time. I watched the Phantom Menace for the first time on VHS, and I couldn't stop looking at that box. Every single day before I went to primary school, I would stare. I couldn't stop staring. I was like, what was this film? I'd never seen anything like it. Honestly, every day before I went to school, and sometimes when I came back from school, I'd just stare at the box and think, what was that? Whoa, just amazing. And then the following Saturday, I watched Attack of the Clones, and I was like, okay, that wasn't as good. But then the following Saturday after that, I watched Revenge of the Sith, and I was like, wow. And then the following Saturday after that, I watched A New Hope, and I thought, wow. And I also thought, why was that different than, why did A New Hope look slightly older than Revenge of the Sith? It wasn't until quite a few years after I watched the entire Star Wars saga for the first time that I realised that 4, 5 and 6 were made first. But anyway, the week after I watched A New Hope, I watched Empire Strikes Back for the first time, and I thought, I've never seen, that was what? That was, I was speechless, you know what I mean? And then the weekend after that, I watched Return of the Jedi, and before I knew it, my world had been completely transformed. If you couldn't tell already, just look behind me. Star Wars has been such an integral and important part of my life, and has been there for me every single year, because every single year since I watched the first 6 Star Wars movies for the first time, I haven't been able to stop rewatching them because of how much they mean to me. Because back then as well, we didn't have the sequel trilogy or any of the Star Wars Disney Plus shows. All we had was the 6 films which George Lucas was behind. And I would just rewatch those films over and over again. And particularly when I was a kid, I was obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with the Phantom Menace. Because it just hit me in the sweet spot at the right time. It was my introduction to Star Wars, and it was my introduction to movies. I mean, I would rewatch this film over and over again, and so it still holds that nostalgia factor for me. That's one of the reasons I still enjoy this film. I haven't actually said this yet, but I should have. I am neither a Phantom Menace lover or a Phantom Menace hater. I think this film now, when I watch it, is fine. There's nothing harmful, there's nothing that really annoys me about it. Whereas when you get onto Attack of the Clones, things that really annoy me about that film. But with the Phantom Menace, sure, it's got a plethora of problems, which I'll talk about very shortly in this review. Don't worry, I'll get onto them. But I will always have nostalgia for it, because I watch it and it makes me smile, and it feels like Star Wars, because it was the film which introduced me into this Star Wars world, which I haven't been able to get enough of ever since I first saw this film. Yeah, this movie means so much to me and really does hold a special place in my heart, and I still remember that first day I saw it and just not being able to get over what I was witnessing whilst we were watching it on my small TV downstairs, because we used to have a very small TV. Yeah, just thinking about it now, thinking about that first memory of watching the Phantom Menace, it's like, oh, it just brings a huge smile to my face. Now when I watch the film, I understand all the big problems it has. And if I'm being completely frank, this is a sort of Star Wars movie you stick on in the background whilst you're doing something else. I don't know, maybe you're building a Lego set. Maybe building a Lego Star Wars set then. I just got a new Lego Star Wars set today, so there you go. You know, maybe you put this on in the background when you're building a Lego Star Wars set, or you're, I don't know, doing something else, because this isn't a film which requires 100% of your attention. And in fact, I think if you give this film 100% of your attention, you will be frustrated by it. Because yesterday I was watching it, and I haven't seen the film for about 2 years, which is unheard of for me in Star Wars. But I just haven't got around to rewatching all of the Star Wars movies over the past couple of years. I think the last Star Wars movie I watched was it Rogue One? Did I watch Rogue One last year? I think I might have watched... I definitely watched half of Rogue One last year, but I haven't watched all of the Star Wars movies together for a good couple of years now. So anyway, I was rewatching it for the first time in about 2 years last night, maybe over 2 years now, and I was thinking, God, there is so much wrong with this film. I mean, first of all, the story doesn't make any sense, and it's confusing, and you don't really care about what's going on. The dialogue is terrible. This is an awfully written film. You know, it does feel like after George Lucas made all these millions to billions of dollars from the original Star Wars trilogy from 1977 to 1983, you know, from the release of the first, from A New Hope to Return of the Jedi, it feels like after that he went into hiding almost, and he didn't really have much human contact, which I know isn't the truth, because actually he was doing a lot behind the scenes, you know, pushing the boundaries of technology in terms of filmmaking. His team, not him personally, but his team actually came up with Pixar, by the way. They sold it off to Disney, but he was actually one of the people behind Pixar. So there you go. Anyway, little side note there. Going back into what I was saying, it feels like between the release of the original trilogy and The Phantom Menace, George Lucas didn't really have much human contact, because there are certain lines in the film that's like, this is not how people talk to each other. For instance, in the first scene that Anakin shares with Padme, in their first interaction, Anakin goes, "Are you an angel?" Oh, that's not how boys and girls, men and women talk to each other. It's really bad dialogue with that, which makes me think that George Lucas had lost touch with reality by the time he came around to writing The Phantom Menace in 1997, which is when he began writing it. Also lines like "yippee," which Anakin keeps saying throughout the film, and Jar Jar's gun mate, you know, who is the same species as him, it goes, "You sorry big doo-doo now." I can't do impressions particularly well from the Star Wars characters, but just lines like that which make you think, oh no, George Lucas had lost touch with reality by the time he came on to writing these films. And I think that's evident in Attack of the Clones. I also think that's evident in Revenge of the Sith, and I think it's evident in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which he wrote the story for in 2008. Because when you get to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's such a leap, you know, I'm not going to say forward, because it's not a leap forward from the original first three Indiana Jones films at all, but it's so different than the first three Indiana Jones films in its story. It's like all of a sudden George Lucas became obsessed with aliens and just went, for the fourth Indiana Jones movie, we're going to go really wacky, we're going to do aliens. It doesn't really make sense. So, you know, I think the Star Wars prequel trilogy is where that really starts to show that George Lucas had, you know, started to become out of touch with reality, where you have lines like, it's such a bad line, I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat it, "Are you an angel?" I mean, God, if I said that to a girl back in primary school, I think I never would have, I don't think I ever would have forgotten about it. I don't mean that in a good way whatsoever. Also, The direction to this film really isn't that good. It feels like George Lucas gave no direction to his actors, and the actors have actually said this. You know, many of the actors who worked on the Star Wars movies have spoken very highly of George Lucas, but have also said he didn't give very much direction. And you can tell when the film's going on, the performances at times, and these are from actors I really like. You know, I love Liam Neeson, I love Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman has become an Academy Award nominated actor since starring in these films, but at the same time you watch them in these movies and it's like their line deliveries are so wooden and stale. I mean, it's not particularly a well-directed film. Plus, throughout most of the film, you know, we keep getting told that the people in Naboo are dying. They've been held in camps, and hell has boiled over Naboo, where the Droid Federation army has taken over. But the thing is, we keep getting told that, but we never see it happen. We never see any of the people from Naboo, apart from the main characters which we follow, and the politicians and the people who served the Queen, Amidala. We never see anybody in Naboo actually suffer from the pain of the droids, and it's like, for God's sakes, if you showed us that, this film could have been so much better, and we could have actually felt something when you get onto the big final battle, because you do feel something in the duel between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan, and I'll talk about that. I'll talk about why you feel something there, but you don't feel anything when the Gungans are attacking the droids in that battle, because it's like, why are they fighting for? Okay, I understand the Gungan army wants to save their land, but I don't really care about the Gungans. The Gungans have been incredibly annoying, because Jar Jar Binks has been incredibly annoying. Pardon me, because Jar Jar Binks has been incredibly annoying, and they're fighting the droids, for who? For what other characters? The battle, and there's nothing behind the battle in this film. The Gungan and droid battle and the spaceship battle, the space battle. You know, there's nothing behind those battles in this film, and it just feels, when you get to that stuff, visually, it's quite stunning. And I'll get onto that in more detail later on in this review, why it was quite stunning and how they're pushing the boundaries with this film. But at the same time, there's nothing behind it, so you don't feel anything. It's kind of fun to watch, but it's also kind of forgettable as soon as it finishes. The battle sequence, that is. And a lot of the film is like that. A lot of the film, when I was watching it yesterday, when I first saw it, I thought this was like the best paced movie I'd ever seen. I thought it kept moving, and it was like, whoa, this film never stopped going. And then when I rewatched it yesterday, I was like, no, there are a lot of parts of this film which are actually really, really slow. And I rewatched this film on Disney Plus yesterday, and the first time I saw this, I already said I watched it on a VHS. When I was rewatching it on Disney Plus on streaming, one thing that genuinely frustrates me, like the other things I can get over, but this thing, it's more of a personal frustration with the Phantom Menace. CGI Yoda. I can get over CGI Yoda in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, because he was always CGI in those films. But he was puppeted in The Phantom Menace, and puppeted Yoda is the true Yoda. Puppeted Yoda was a Yoda we got in the original trilogy. He was a Yoda we get to see again in The Last Jedi, and Disney understood that. You know, I'll talk about my feelings on Disney Star Wars when I got onto Rogue One and the sequel trilogy and the Star Wars Disney Plus shows later on, over the next couple of months when I'm reviewing the Star Wars franchise. But at the same time, you can't argue that they got the Yoda stuff right in Last Jedi. It's only a small segment of that film, but it's such an important segment. And when you watch The Phantom Menace, at least when I watch it on DVD or on VHS, I feel like they got that right. I'm so happy when I see puppeted Yoda whenever I watch this film on DVD. But when I watched it on streaming, I was like, oh, CGI Yoda, why have you had... I don't like that he's in this film. I prefer the old puppeted Yoda in this movie. I just love the way the puppeted Yoda looks, and I think that takes away from the feat of work which Frank Oz did as well, because Frank Oz, he voiced Yoda and actually puppeted Yoda during the original trilogy and came back to puppet him in The Last Jedi and puppeted him in the original cut of The Phantom Menace. I feel it takes away from his work, you know? Because he just replaced him with CGI, and I thought that was a bad decision. I I don't think it was a good decision what George Lucas did when he went back and remastered, well, quote unquote, remastered and made it, quote unquote, and made the original trilogy, quote unquote, better in the late 90s. But at least he didn't replace Yoda in those films, in the original 3 films, with a CGI Yoda. He replaced it with CGI Yoda, and I don't think he should have remastered this film to start off with. And I really don't think they should have taken out CGI Yoda. No, all the way around. I really don't think they should have taken out puppeted Yoda. CGI Yoda in the Phantom Menace, in particular, it's a personal frustration because I remember watching the Phantom Menace for the first time and seeing puppeted Yoda and thinking, how the hell are they doing that? And I don't have that feeling when I watch CGI Yoda. You know, sure, it looks cool, but yeah, I prefer the puppeted version myself. And there were some not great racial stereotypes in the characters of Jar Jar Binks, Newt and Ruin in this film, which have not aged well at all. And I could go on and on with the problems with this film. Like, for instance, a small problem, but it's actually quite big in my eyes, is the lighting in this film. When you get to the Naboo battle between the droids and the Gungans, it's all bright and sunny. And when that was happening, I was thinking, does it ever rain on Naboo? Because this fight sequence, this battle sequence would be so much more effective if it was raining right now. You know, that's why it rains in movies, because it's meant to heighten emotion and it's meant to actually... The Battle of Helm's Deep, it rains in that, and it makes that battle so much more intense to watch, you know, in The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Whilst in this film, the battle takes place in complete broad daylight. It's sunny and everything, and I'm thinking, oh, if only you made... Even if you just made it a little overcast, I think it would be more effective to the battle. But the battle feels playful because you've got the Gungans, which are just completely and utterly silly, and you've got Jar Jar Binks being incredibly annoying during the battle, like he is throughout the rest of the movie. Honestly, the more I rewatch this film, the more annoying I find Jar Jar. I used to love Jar Jar Binks, by the way. I used to absolutely love him back when I was a kid. I remember for Christmas asking, or was it for my birthday? Actually, it was for my birthday. I remember, I think it was for my like 6th or 7th birthday. I remember asking for a Jar Jar Binks figure, and I couldn't wait to get that Jar Jar Binks figure. And I actually had to wait a couple of days till after my birthday because I was getting it from someone who wasn't in my family. But anyway, I couldn't wait to get this Jar Jar Binks figure, and I got it, and I was obsessed with the figure. But the more I rewatch these movies, the more I rewatch the Phantom Menace, because he's not really in Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith too much. You know, the more I rewatch the Phantom Menace, the more Jar Jar annoys me. I rewatched this film with my friend Lewis, who's been on the channel in the past a couple of times. You know, I rewatched this a couple of years ago with him, and during all this stuff on Tatooine, me and Lewis were kind of looking at each other like, oh yeah, we understand why Jar Jar is so annoying now. And when I was watching this yesterday, I was like, yes, I understand why he's so annoying. But anyway, going back onto what I was saying, the battle just feels playful because you don't care about any of the characters, there's nothing behind the battle, and because there's nothing visually that interesting about the battle other than the CGI stuff going on in it. Yes, it was pushing the boundaries of CGI and, you know, visual effects. They were pushing the boundaries with special effects when they were making this movie, and I'll get onto that in more detail and how I admire that about this film later on in this review. But you still could have done something more visually interesting with that battle. Does that add a little bit of overcast to actually add some more effect to the battle? I mean, I could go on and on with the problems with this movie. I could go on and on about them. Like, the opening crawl is not interesting whatsoever. But that all being said, I still enjoy this film because, and I know it's going to sound like a petty reason, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it is the reason that I always return to rewatch this film, and I don't always return to rewatch Attack of the Clones, but it is always the reason I return to rewatch The Phantom Menace. It's because it feels like Star Wars to me. It was mine took from the Star Wars. I had this great nostalgia for it, and I watch the film and I smile, and I do think there are some generally good things about it. I mean, first of all, I'm one of the genuinely phenomenal things about this movie, and yes, there are some phenomenal things, is the John Williams musical score. Ba-da-dum bum 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 ba-da-dum. Ba-da-dum bum 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 ba-da-dum. Bum 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 bum. I could go on and on trying to sing the Duel of the Fates theme that plays during the duel between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, because it's such a perfect piece of music. And that theme was specifically designed for this film, you know. And I love the Star Wars music that is used in all the movies as well. The classic Star Wars fanfare, which I tried to sing earlier on this review, you know, every single time I hear that piece of music, and I listen to I listen to all, you know, music from all Star Wars movies daily, and yes, that even includes the sequel trilogy, because I think the scores to those films are phenomenal as well. When I talk about that in more detail, when I talk about the sequel trilogy in the next couple of months on this channel, I listen to Star Wars music daily, and every single time I listen to those classic themes, it just makes my life feel better than it actually is right now. You know, the classic Star Wars fanfare theme, which everybody knows, it's perfection, as is the end credit theme, you know. I love that end credits theme, because every single time I hear the end credits theme, I feel like I've just completed something in life, and I know I've just watched the Star Wars movie, and I know it's just made my day, well, I know it's probably just made my day 10 times better. Attack of the Clones notwithstanding, or Solo notwithstanding. Those two Star Wars movies I straight up do not like. But any of the other Star Wars movies, I can, and you know, when I finish the film and I hear that end credits playing, I just have the biggest grin on my face. And then you also get the Force theme, which is played in all of the main Star Wars movies and in Rogue One. It's not played in Solo, but it is played in most of the Star Wars movies. You know, dum bum 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 bum. The way it's the way it's intertwined into this film, and the way it's interweaved into the film, should I say, is perfect. And the use of Yoda's theme in this film, you know, da 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 bum 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 ba da, the way that theme is interweaved into this film as well, because it isn't overused, and I really loved how you get to hear some old, you know, classic and iconic Star Wars themes in this film, and there's a reason they're iconic, because they're fucking brilliant. But also, there is so much more to this score alone. You know, back there, I have my own CD collection. I wonder if anyone actually knows what CD is anymore, because most people use streaming for music, as do I. Back there, in my bedroom, I've got my CD collection. And in my CD collection, I have a double CD of the complete score to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, to this film, because I cannot tell you how many times, and I'm being genuinely serious here, I cannot tell you how many times I've listened to the complete score to The Phantom Menace. You know, because the score itself, if you listen to it outside of the movie, you would think you are listening to a score for the most wonderful and exciting and thrilling film of all time. You genuinely would. The score does such a good job at encapsulating the feel of this film more than the actual film does, more than George Lucas did with his writing and his directing of this movie. If you don't believe me, listen to the complete score, not just the album version of the score which is on Spotify. I mean the complete score. Go and buy it. Go and buy the CDs on Spotify, because yes, this film isn't great. I totally get that. But at the same time, the score itself, it's incredible. It truly is. And how John Williams actually made this film entertaining, made this film somewhat entertaining in his score, cannot be understated. Because John Williams did a magic trick in making this film at least watchable, in making the entire prequel trilogy at least watchable, because God knows what the films would have been like without the John Williams musical scores. Because the John Williams musical score to this movie, I mean, I've already spoken about the Duel of the Fates theme, which is so iconic, and again, it's iconic for a reason. It's fucking brilliant, you know. And I don't swear I don't swear often on this channel, but I do when I feel strongly about something. And it's not only the Duel of the Fates theme, because when people talk about the music to the Phantom Menace, they always go, "Ooh, Duel of the Fates." But there's so much to the musical score to this film, you know, such as the theme to the Anakin's theme, which is a great piece of music, you know. And I love how when you listen to Anakin's theme, at the end of that piece of music, you can hear some of the Imperial March, you know, Darth Vader's theme. You can hear that in Anakin's theme when you listen to it towards the end of that piece of music. And I think it's a really great piece of music which sums up the character of Anakin Skywalker in this film. Plus there's a music that plays when towards the end of the pod race sequence. There's the music that plays during the battle, you know, dun 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 dun. I do a terrible job at singing John Williams piece and John Williams music, but still you get the point I'm making. There's so much to this score than just a couple of themes. This is actually, I'm not going to say it's John Williams' best Star Wars prequel score, but I think it's a phenomenal score that I don't think gets enough credit. You know, John Williams, he did the music to Return of the Jedi in 1983. He returned to the music for this film in 1999, and it was like he never left. Honest, the music sounds so much like Star Wars music in the way you want it to. And there's always that worry, you know, when a conductor or a composer hasn't worked on a franchise for a while, so he might know how to compose the music. Yeah, even so, there's a time gap between the making of this film and the scoring of this film and the scoring of the original trilogy. It still sounds like Star Wars music. It still captures that Star Wars feel. And another piece of music I love from this movie, I can't believe I forgot to mention this piece of music, but another piece of music I love from this movie is the theme Panica and the Queen's Protectors. Bum 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 bum. Every single time I hear that piece of music, it makes me smile, and again, it makes my life feel better because that piece of music in particular was played every single time you completed a level on Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga. You know, that music played, and I also used to have it as my alarm, so whenever I heard it, I'd be like, oh god, my day is going to be good now. You know, and Star Wars music just has that effect on me. I'm going to go on about the Star Wars score so much in these reviews, I really am, because I have thoughts about all the Star Wars scores. My thoughts on the score to Attack of the Clones might not be 100% positive, but at the same time, I have such fondness for the scores to these movies. They mean so much to me. They truly do. Because I listen to these scores, like, I genuinely mean this, every single day. And they almost feel like they're a part of me now. You know, if you cut me up, you'd probably hear some Star Wars music at the same time as I began to be cut up. Because it feels like it's ingrained into me. You know, and the Star Wars music to any of the movies is just yeah, it feels like it's a part of me now. And I think John Williams has always been a part of me ever since I watched The Phantom Menace for the first time, because I didn't always know it was John Williams. It wasn't until a couple of years after I watched all the first 6 Star Wars movies for the first time. You know, and I was looking up online and I was like, who did the music for these movies? When I began to be more interested in music, when I started to play musical instruments myself, you know, I began to look up online, who actually, you know, composed the music to these films? And I realised it was the same guy, and I realised how important he was to my childhood, because he didn't just compose the music to Star Wars, he also did the music to E.T., to Indiana Jones, to all 5 Indiana Jones movies, and those first three Indiana Jones movies were again, so integral to my childhood. And so many other movies, Jurassic Park, The Lost World, films which were such a huge part of my childhood. And Star Wars is on top of all of them in terms of how much John Williams really became a part of my childhood and became a part of who I am. And I think a lot of that is down to his score for The Phantom Menace, which was the first Star Wars score I ever heard. I don't know if The Phantom Menace would have had that effect on me when I first watched it if it wasn't for the John Williams musical score. That's just a fact. I really don't think it would have had that effect on me. So yeah, you get the point I'm making. I bloody love the John Williams musical score to the movie. And I do think there are some genuinely great things about it. For instance, the duel between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, I think is pretty damn entertaining to watch. I think it's wildly entertaining to watch because there's actually something behind it. I heard Dave Filoni, who's now heavily involved at Lucasfilm, as a person behind the Clone Wars TV show, Rebels. He was also behind the Ahsoka live-action TV show, and he's helped on such other TV shows as The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, and Obi-Wan. He's behind a lot of stuff at Lucasfilm right now, and he spoke about the genius of the Duel of the Fates, the genius of the duel between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan, because if Darth Maul wins that duel, he takes Anakin away, and Anakin immediately becomes a Sith Lord. If Qui-Gon wins that duel, Anakin stays good. And we all know what happens when Obi-Wan wins that duel. And when I heard Dave Filoni talking about that, it added so much to that duel for me, because I always found that duel to be cool. But as I began to watch more films over the past, 10 years now, I want something behind this action, Otherwise, it's just visual noise, like the gun and droid battle is in this movie. That's just visual noise to me. It's kind of entertaining, but it's visual noise in the end. Yeah, the big duel at the end of this movie, the big duel in the finale of this film, there's something to it. And when Dave Filoni explained that, I was like, yeah, that's actually changed my perspective on the finale of the film, particularly that duel. And I'm so thankful that he did that, because now when I watch that duel, it makes it more engaging to watch. And there's a moment in the duel where there's a close-up on each one of the characters. A close-up on Qui-Gon, a close-up on Obi-Wan, a close-up on Darth Maul. And I'm like, George Lucas is actually trying to tell a little bit of a story here. Like I said before, if Darth Maul wins, Anakin becomes a Sith. If Qui-Gon wins, Anakin stays good. And if Obi-Wan wins, well, we all know where Anakin goes in his story, because Obi-Wan does win. So there you go. I love how that sequence actually tells a story in itself, and plus the sequence is wildly entertaining to watch because of the choreography in the fight scenes with the dueling. The choreography, I still watch it now and I think, how much time did that take to choreograph? How much time were Liam Neeson, Ray Parker Jr., I think that's who it is. Ray Parker Jr. He did the Ghostbusters song. What am I saying? It's Ray Parker, I think, or Ray Park. I don't know who plays Darth Maul. Anyway, yeah, the guy who plays Darth Maul and Ewan McGregor, who obviously played Obi-Wan. God knows how long it took for those guys to rehearse that fight sequence, and it pays off it superbly. Because that fight sequence is exhilarating because there's something behind it, as what he said. And the dueling is actually, my lightsaber here, keeps moving, doesn't it? Doesn't stop going. It's like, whoa. So anyway, the duel in this film, I love. I also love the pod race sequence, which is of course inspired by the chariot sequence in Ben-Hur. The pod race sequence, say we will about it is a bit goofy at the beginning of the pod race sequence. We had the flag parade and everything. By the way, another great piece of music that plays behind the flag parade. Bom 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 bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum bum bum. Great piece of music that plays behind that, but also the flag parade itself is a bit goofy, and the kites in the pod race sequence, all the kites are not great. But from a filmmaking standpoint, the pod race sequence, chef's kiss. Honestly, it really is. Like, the sound design during that sequence is still nothing has held a candle to it recently. I've seen some films with really good sound design recently, like Challenges, which I just reviewed last week. That had some superb sound design in, where I felt like I was going to be hit by the tennis balls in that movie. And there was another film which I watched recently. I was like, wow, the sound design was really fantastic. What was it? Was it Civil War? It might have been Civil War. Anyway, yeah, I've seen some really good movies with great sound design. But the sound design during the pod race sequence and the sound editing, I don't know how they did that. It was Ben Burtt who did the sound design on the original Star Wars movies, who came up with the sound of the lightsaber, the sound of the guns in these movies, you know, the sounds of the spaceships. It was the person behind all of that, and the sound of the pod race are so real to the point that I believe pod racing was actually a thing when I watched it for the first time. The sound design and the filmmaking in that pod race sequence still astound me today. And it also makes me think, well, if George Lucas could do that, why is the rest of the film paced all over the place? Why is it so slow at times? And why is it really not as well directed as it could have been? But yet that pod race sequence is so well done, though, and it's so well paced, and it's actually quite gripping to watch. Because if Anakin doesn't win the pod race, he has to stay a slave. There's something behind my favourite scenes in this film. You know, whether the pod race, the duel between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan. There's something behind these scenes, and I love the spaceship and creature and character designs. There is something to be said about the way this film looks, and how George Lucas, when he came to write and direct this film in 1997, when this film first went into production, it went into pre-production, he didn't just remake A New Hope, which, when they came back to rebooting Star Wars in 2015, that's exactly what they did with The Force Awakens. But I'll talk about that when I go into my review of The Force Awakens over the next couple of months on this channel. But anyway, there is something to be said about the fact that George Lucas didn't just remake A New Hope. He went for a completely different idea. Yes, the idea didn't really work, but you have to admire it's something different, and there's a novelty with this film in that it's so peculiar. It's not like the original trilogy, but it also still feels like Star Wars, and that's a hard combination to get, you know, and I think he did a good job with that. And another thing I think George Lucas did a good job with, and something that I always think he did a good job with in all the films he was involved in, I mean, not only the Star Wars films, in the Indiana Jones films, in Willow, which he was a writer on, and, you know, all the films he was involved in, from A New Hope to Revenge of the Sith, and arguably Clone Wars, but not as much. In these films, he was always pushing the boundaries in terms of where technology was with film at the time. You know, he was always trying to do something that hadn't been done in cinema before. And that is, in this movie, the CGI. The CGI is dated now. It just is. When you rewatch the film, when I was rewatching it yesterday, I was like, yeah, the CGI, it looks like 1999 CGI. It looks like CGI from the turn of the century, and it really doesn't, it doesn't work. But as a product of its time, as all films are, the CGI was pushing the boundaries. And I might be wrong here, so do correct me if I am wrong, but I don't think before this movie came out we'd ever had a fully CGI'd character before. A character which was done by, I don't know if it was motion capture technology actually, a character, or Jar Jar, but a fully CGI'd character, because yes, you may argue Gollum, that's a fully CGI'd character, and we had Gollum in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy came after the Phantom Menace came out, and I don't think Gollum would have existed without Jar Jar Binks. I don't think Peter Jackson's King Kong would have existed without Jar Jar Binks. There's plenty of other examples. I don't think a lot of the stuff in superhero movies nowadays would have existed without ILM, the team behind the special effects and visual effects of the Star Wars prequels and of the original Star Wars movies. And I don't think a lot of the fully CGI characters we see in superhero movies nowadays would have happened without Jar Jar Binks. Now, Jar Jar Binks is a terrible character. I'm not arguing with anyone there, but there has to be something said about the way he looks visually and how they made that character work and how he interacts with human characters in the film. Like, there's one point in the film where Qui-Gon, when he's at the dinner table with Anakin, Padme, and Anakin's mother, he literally grabs Jar Jar's tongue. And that's fully CGI. And there had to be something said about how they were pushing the boundaries there. And again, say what about the CGI character. Say what you will about Jar Jar's character, that's what I meant to say there. Say what you will about Jar Jar's character, but they were pushing the boundaries with CGI there. And they were also pushing the boundaries in those big CGI epic sequences, whether it's the battle between the Gungans and the droids, or the parade that happens at the end of the film, or how much CGI is actually in this movie. It's too much CGI, and some might argue that that was actually a bad development in technology, because look at the overuse of CGI in some movies nowadays. It ain't great, but they were doing something different, and I always admire George Lucas for trying to push the boundaries in terms of visual and special effects with his films. I was always pushing, I was always trying to do something that hadn't been done before, and in doing so he used the special effects company known as ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, to help that happen. And when there's this brilliant documentary on YouTube, it's available for free on YouTube, that goes into the behind the scenes and the making of the Phantom Menace, and you see how many people worked on the special effects, the character, the creature designs, how they all storyboarded this film. I said Doug Chang, I think he storyboarded the film, and how much time he spent doing the storyboards. He spent like a whole year doing the storyboards of this film. How the visual effects team were trying to create something that again hadn't been done before, and there has to be something said about that. There has to be something said positively as well about how George Lucas pushed the boundaries in terms of where technology was in cinema by the time he was making the Phantom Menace, because there was things in this film that, although you don't feel it now, every film is a product of its time. And in 1999, I can imagine people sitting down to watch this in the cinema and being completely taken back by visually how it looks, because it hadn't been seen in cinema before. The CGI and the heavy use of CGI in this film. There is an over-reliance on CGI in all the Star Wars prequels, but you've got to admire, he was pushing the boundaries, and I always admire filmmakers that do. And that's a reason that I always return to the Phantom Menace, because it was of its time, something that hadn't really been seen before. So, this is an add-on. Something I forgot to mention was actually recording this podcast, but something I remembered to mention after I finished recording the podcast. So this is me from beyond the podcast, and that is this. Another reason I appreciate the Phantom Menace is because it was the film which made Lego Star Wars a thing. Because before 1999, Lego Star Wars wasn't really a thing. And Lego Star Wars sets began to be made in 1999 for the Phantom Menace's release, and Lego Star Wars has continued since 1999, making sets, making Lego games. You had the Lego Star Wars Part 1, then you had Lego Star Wars Part 2, then you had Lego Star Wars A Complete Saga, then you had Lego Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you had Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens, and then, most recently, you had Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. And without the Phantom Menace, we wouldn't have got any of those games, so our childhoods would not have been the same. My childhood would not have been the same. And my childhood would not have been the same, because I wouldn't have had Lego Star Wars there to accompany me along the way. I mean, I've only got one Lego Star Wars set in my hand right now. I've got the TIE Fighter. No, it's not a TIE Fighter, but it's one of, what's it called? I can't think of the name of it right now. TIE Striker, I think that might be the name of it. I've only got this set in my hand right now, but you might not be able to tell, although I've got many Lego Star Wars sets around me right now. Just over there, you can't see it on the video obviously, but I've got a Lego AT-AT, got a Lego AT-ST, got a Lego Droid Federation tank, which you can see from this film, got a Lego Death Star over there, got Obi-Wan's ship from Revenge of the Sith over there. I've got so many, just down there, I've got a diorama from Return of the Jedi of the Speed Biker chase. I've got so many Star Wars Lego sets in this room alone, and Lego Star Wars has been such a huge part of my life. It's the reason I'm into Lego, really. I don't think if Star Wars was available in Lego, I would collect Lego at all, but it is available, so that's one of the reasons I'm into Lego so much. And I'll always appreciate the Phantom Menace for making Lego Star Wars happen. You know, and that's actually why they're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace this year. It's not just because it's actually the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace. It's also because it's the 25th anniversary of Lego Star Wars. That's what they're really celebrating at Lego. I said earlier on in this podcast that they're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace in Lego Star Wars sets this year. And well, while that is partly true, it's more true that they're just celebrating the 25th anniversary of Lego Star Wars because they coincided. So yeah, I will eternally be grateful to the Phantom Menace for making Lego Star Wars a thing. And that's something I forgot to mention when I was actually recording the podcast, and I was annoyed with myself when I realised I forgot to mention that, and it's something I had to mention in an add-on. So anyway, I will always appreciate the Phantom Menace for making Lego Star Wars a thing. Anyway, back to the podcast and back to me rambling on about this film. Plus, another great thing about this film is how George Lucas expands on the Star Wars universe. People complain nowadays that Star Wars universe is feeling too small because we're always returning to Tatooine in all these Star Wars TV shows. And I don't totally agree with that, by the way. But in this film, we return to Tatooine, but we get to see a different side to it. You know, in the original Star Wars movie, A New Hope, we see Mos Eisley. In this movie, we see Mos Espa. I love that. I love how we get to see a different side to Tatooine, and we get to see Naboo, a planet which didn't feature in the original cuts to the original trilogy. It does feature the very end of Return of the Jedi, but that's in the remastered version, so it doesn't really count. Also, you see Coruscant, which isn't featured in the original cuts to the original trilogy. You see planets which hadn't been featured before in the Star Wars franchise, and expands on the Star Wars universe in a way that I think only George Lucas could make work. And you've got to admire the look of Darth Maul, because he does like a cool kite and the double-ended lightsaber. He's a wasted villain. He only says like 2 lines in this film. I don't even know if he says 2 lines, but he's a wasted villain. And honestly, I'll talk about this more when I get onto my views of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, where he really should have had one villain throughout all 3 of these films. I know you technically have Palpatine, yeah, I know. But at the same time, you should have had either Count Dooku, General Grievous, or Darth Maul as a main villain throughout all 3 of the prequels. That being said, Darth Maul is a great villain, and I mean, he doesn't disappoint when he actually gets a double-bladed lightsaber out and starts having fights with everybody. You know, I like that sort of stuff. To me, that feels like Star Wars, and this film feels like Star Wars because, well, it was my introduction to Star Wars, and I know I keep going back to that, but that is why I really enjoy the Phantom Menace still. Take that back. I don't really enjoy it, but that's why I enjoy the Phantom Menace. Even though it's really one of those Star Wars movies you could just put on the background while you do something else. I don't think it's a great introduction to the Star Wars universe for any newcomers to the Star Wars franchise. But I'm kind of contradicting myself there, though, aren't I? Because this was my introduction, so I don't know, maybe it is, and maybe there's just something I'm missing. Maybe I didn't realise this at the time when I first watched it, but actually this is a film that is perfectly designed for kids, and it works perfectly for kids when they're first being introduced to Star Wars, because I can totally see, I can totally understand why so many people went to go and see this movie in 1999, big Star Wars fans, were disappointed by it. They felt it was too much aimed at kids, because imagine being a kid when the original Star Wars films came out from 1977 to 1983, and then growing up and you get to 1999, you think you're going to experience a much mature version of Star Wars, and you go and watch this movie. I can completely understand why people hated this film, but maybe there's something about it which I didn't fully realise at the time, and I still don't really know now. Maybe there's something about this film where it hits kids in the sweet spot if they watch it at the correct time in their lives. I think that's kind of what happened with me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the world, or maybe it's just something about the creature designs where if you're a kid and you haven't seen this sort of stuff before, you might love it or you might hate it. But if you love it, that's it for you. And I think that's what happened with me. And I can watch it from now and completely understand it's a terrible movie. I don't think it's a well-made film. I don't think it's an awfully made film. I think it has some genuinely good directed part 2, particularly the pod race sequence. But at the same time, even though I can sit here now and say that this is a bad movie and completely understand why so many people hate it and so many people call it the worst Star Wars movie or one of the worst Star Wars movies and rank it amongst the worst Star Wars movies as a whole, I like it because it's got nostalgia for me, and I like how it was pushing the boundaries at the time. I like how it feels like Star Wars. I like how it expands on the universe, on the Star Wars universe, whilst still staying true to Star Wars. And I like how it's cool to look at as well, which sounds like a stupid reason for liking the film. But so what? Star Wars is always cool to look at. The best of Star Wars is always cool to look at. And this, this feels like a Star Wars movie as well. I don't know what the budget was for this film, but I dare say it was huge. One second, I'm going to look it up actually. What was the budget for the Phantom Menace? Give me the answer, Google. What was the budget for the Phantom Menace? It was $150 million, which is actually not a lot compared to some movies nowadays, compared to the budget of some later Star Wars movies that Disney made. And you can tell this film had a big budget. You can tell it had a very big budget. Again, compared to some other Disney Star Wars movies which were made, like Solo, which had like a budget of $300 million and doesn't look it, by the way. But I'll talk about that more when I talk about Solo, and I do my review of Solo at some point on this channel in the near future. But again, I enjoy this film. For what it is, there's just something about it. There's a novelty about it. I'm always drawn back to this film. And I think more than anything, it's because it was my introduction to Star Wars. And it was kind of my introduction to movies as well, as a whole. Like, after watching this film, I began to watch a lot more films. And I'm so glad that it was this film which did that for me, because I think without it, I wouldn't have been blessed by the joy that is Star Wars, To look at my t-shirt, I've got my Obi-Wan, got a cutout of Obi-Wan from this movie back there, because I'll always have an affection for the Phantom Menace. I'll always have an affection for it, even though there are like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of problems with this film. I was just looking at my notes here, and one thing I haven't mentioned is, in the movie, the characters keep getting told to hurry up, come on, we need to get back to Naboo and save Naboo, and we keep getting told that we don't have much time left. But the film doesn't pick up in pace whenever that happens. Usually when you get told in a movie, oh yeah, we don't have much time left, guess what, the pace of the film's going to pick up, or something happens that's going to pick up the rest of the film, and the film's going to feel more suspenseful. Nothing in this film feels that suspenseful, with the exception of the pod race and the duel between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. Nothing in the film feels that suspenseful, and yet the characters in the film keep saying, hurry up, we don't have much time left. Time left for what? What's going to happen if the droids win? I don't know. The film doesn't really tell me. Even it did, and if it did tell me, it didn't tell me well. The storytelling, it's not great. There's so much wrong with this film, but boy do I enjoy it. And I shouldn't do, because when I was watching this film yesterday, I will say, I was smiling and laughing along with it, and somewhat unintentionally. There were some parts of the film I was thinking, oh yeah, that's not great, and I would laugh at what's going on, like when Qui-Gon goes, there's always a bigger fish. It's a visual representation of that saying. Why do we need that? It doesn't play any service to the overall narrative of the film, but there's something about it which always draws me back to it. And heck, it feels like Star Wars, which is enough for me. I will always have nostalgia of this film, and I will always return to it. And it's not my favourite Star Wars movie by a long shot, but I'll never forget that first time watching this film. I'm thinking, what the hell am I witnessing? What the hell is this film? I'm being overwhelmed by what was happening to me when I watched the movie the first time on VHS. And yeah, that is why I still enjoy the Phantom Menace, because you'll always hold a special place in my heart. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, you know what? I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I want to explain my rating there by saying that I'm giving this movie a 7 out of 10 for personal reasons. Alright? If I was to sit back, take my personal reasons out of the equation and put my film reviewing hat on, I would say this movie is, I don't know, a 3 or 4 out of 10. I haven't really given that much thought. You know, I'll give it a very low rating if I watched this film for the first time. I reckon I would absolutely hate it. If I watched this film for the first time nowadays, I reckon I would detest it. I would be like, how do people like this shit? But I do like this shit, you know, because I watched this at a very different time. You've heard me say it quite a few times now. And the John Williams musical score is genuinely phenomenal. Like, it really is. One piece of music that I haven't even spoken about is the theme that plays when the droids are activated in the battle, you know. Boom, ba ba bum bum, ba ba bum, ba bum, ba bum 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 bum, ba ba bum 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 bum. I think that's one of the most underrated pieces of music in the Star Wars franchise as a whole. I need to catch my breath after this review because I've been going on and on and on. My mouth is beginning to dry up. So I'm going to round this review off by saying that I enjoy this film. I've spoken about why I enjoy it at length, and I am glad that it's back out in cinemas for its 25th anniversary, because it means that there's people that want to see the film. You know, when I was booking my seat the other day for the movie at the cinema seemed half full. I'm telling you, there's still people who have an affection for this film, regardless of what some people may say online. So yeah, clearly I'm not in the minority, but at the same time, I want to also emphasise I am not a Phantom Menace lover, and I can understand there are so many things wrong with this film, but I'm also not a Phantom Menace hater. I enjoy it, and that's why I gave it a 7 out of 10, because it's just, I watched it at the right time in my life. I watched it at the right time, and it introduced me, again, I know I've said it before, but just to emphasise for like the 100th time in this review, it introduced me to movies, and introduced me to Star Wars. And if you just look behind me, you can understand how much Star Wars means to me. And if you just look at what I'm wearing, you know, you can understand how much Star Wars means. I've got a lightsaber here. I've got my Jedi cloak over there that I wore on the thumbnail of this review. You can understand how much Star Wars means to me. And again, I think a lot of that is down to the Phantom Menace. I think it would have been down to A New Hope if I watched that Star Wars review first. But I watched this one first, so it was just the way things happen. I do wish I watched A New Hope first. I wish I watched A New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi, then on to the Phantom Menace. But it wasn't the way things happened. And I'm glad it happened this way though, because it means that I can watch the Phantom Menace and smile and go along with it, because it inherently feels like Star Wars to me, and it has this nostalgia with it for me that I will never let go of, and that is why I still enjoy Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace is a 7 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that is it for today's podcast. If you have seen Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. I want to emphasise this. Please be friendly about these Star Wars film discussions, because there are some people online who are not friendly about discussions regarding some Star Wars movies, and I'll talk about this in more detail when I get onto my views of the Disney Star Wars films. But if you dislike the film, that's totally fine. If you like the film, that's totally fine as well. But just, you know, be respectful in the comment section below and let me know your thoughts on the Phantom Menace. Maybe you thought it was the worst film of all time. And if you did, that's completely fair. Tell me why in the comment section below. And maybe you thought it was the best film of all time. Maybe you think it's better than The Godfather. Whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you haven't yet, you should also know that you can check this podcast out audibly on Spotify at Nine to the Movies on that platform. If you just prefer to listen to your podcast audibly, well, guess what you can do with my podcast on Spotify. And if you are listening to this podcast on Spotify, thank you very much to my Spotify listeners. And you should also know that you can check out the podcast visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform. And whether you have been watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you as always for watching or listening. And I suppose this is it. Yes, we got there in the end. I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon. I look forward to my review of Attack of the Clones coming sometime within the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.